Hello, everybody. Once again, this is your favorite speaker on the world and religions. My name is Dr. Ronald Brown. A lot of you have probably been following my lectures on topics of religion in the modern world. And so I welcome you to another lecture, which hopefully you will find just as exciting as the others. Once again, my name is Dr. Ronald Brown, and I teach history, political science, religious history of the United States at Touro College here in New York. And I have taught as a faculty adjunct at the Unification Theological Seminary, also here in New York, where I have been teaching for a good number of years. I have degrees from various interesting places. My BA was from Gannon University in Erie, Pennsylvania, Catholic University. My first MA was from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. My second MA, MTS in fact, was from Harvard Divinity School in world religions. And then I finished everything up with a PhD in international politics from the University of Geneva in Switzerland. So this gives me a rather well-rounded education on religion and politics. Well, in addition, I have traveled all over the world. As you can see the two pictures here, there's me on the left as I was in my 20s when I lived in Israel for 5 years. On the right is a picture I took of Lower Manhattan when the World Trade Center was attacked and the towers were destroyed on 9/11. So our topic for today is Samuel P. Huntington's theory about the clash of civilizations. Well, religion has emerged as a major force in the world today. Those of you who watched some of my previous talks on the revival of religion, I believe there was one called God is Not Dead, which really debunked Karl Marx's theory that religion was going to fade away as science and technology created heaven on earth. Nietzsche said, God is dead and we have killed him. We have no longer any need. Well, whether unfortunately or fortunately or providentially or whatever, God has come roaring back. My previous talks, I talked about things such as the rise of the religious right in the United States, the evangelicals who captured the presidencies, beginning with Ronald Reagan, who formed an alliance with them, up through Donald Trump, who was their prophet, and other places. The Islamic Revolution in Iran, again, overthrowing the secular American and Israeli supported Shah and replacing it with an Islamic republic. Picture on the left shows me in Jerusalem back in the early 70s. Well, I was there for the Yom Kippur War. You could say I saw the clash of civilizations, the war between the United States and Israel on one hand, and the entire Muslim world on the other. I can't think of a more cataclysmic clash of civilizations. On the right, when I was living in New York, 9/11. Well, of course, as soon as I heard that the buildings had been struck, I grabbed my camera and went running down and spent the day in Lower Manhattan interviewing people, taking pictures. Again, this was a clash between the Islamic world, Muslims, and the United States, the leader of the Christian world. So Samuel P. Huntington, my old professor at Harvard, wrote his famous book, The Clash of Civilizations, where he predicted that the 21st century was going to be a century of holy war. And it was going to be bloody, cruel and vicious as only religious wars can be. When you have the God of Muslims fighting against the God of the Jews, and the gods of the Hindus, the God of Buddhist and Confucianism, the evangelical Christian God, well, these are serious wars. So, once again, this is not just an academic talk, but I was there. I was part of the Yom Kippur War when all my friends in Israel were going to war, seeing the bodies, seeing the ruined tanks barreling through Jerusalem in the middle of the night, taken back to the factories to be restored and sent back to the war. Interviewing thousands of Americans, Air Force, Navy, Army, who were sent to Israel because Israel was losing the war. It was only the massive American intervention that saved the state of Israel, which then marked its turn toward God. And you had the rise of Menachem Begin and the religious extreme right, the Likud in Israel. So I was part of this. I was part of New York, lecturing at the New York Historical Society for years during and after 9/11, going over every bit of information that came out, every bit of information that was suppressed. In fact, I even did a talk in this series on 9/11, the forgotten stories. So in many ways, I experienced this clash of civilizations. So let's get going. Now, Samuel P. Huntington, as I mentioned, was a professor at Harvard University. He passed away not too terribly long ago and was the first serious scholar to say, what is this revival, this return of religion? What is its effect going to be on history? How should historians, political scientists, scholars understand this? Should we say these evangelical Protestants with their praise the Lord, hallelujah stuff and business are just crazies on the margins of history? Are the Israeli West Bank settlers, these fierce militias of settlers taking over Palestinian towns, are they just a phenomenon that will pass? Will the rise of the BJP, the Hindu Nationalist Party in India, simply a flash in the bucket, and everything will go back to nice Western secularism with separation of church and state and all of that? Well, Samuel P. Huntington said, no, fasten your seatbelt. Get ready for a wild ride into the 21st century and maybe even the third millennium. So God is back and he's mad. So Samuel P. Huntington, in his very scholarly way, decided it was time to analyze this seriously. So here again is the outline for today's lecture. Again, what is Huntington's view of history? How did he view history, not just the rise of religion, but before? His understanding of civilizations. He says it was a clash of civilizations, not a clash of gods, not a clash of religions, but a clash of civilizations. And then the proofs, many of which I have lived through, the proofs of his view that civilizations are rising, again, ancient civilizations, and these civilizations are rediscovering the power of gods and religions. Part 4 is going to be, how is this influencing the USA? A big issue for Samuel P. Huntington, and as we're going to see, he even devoted an entire book to this complicated issue. And then point 5, a century of holy wars, the 21st century, and we could even say the third millennium. Well, as the United States and the world stumbled into the 21st century, Samuel P. Huntington was not the only person who came up with a theory to explain what was happening in the world. Francis Fukuyama in Chicago wrote The End of History and the Last Man, saying, with the collapse of communism, American-style democracy and capitalism would sweep the world. It was the only viable ideology for the future, would lead to industrialization, lead to the growth of democracy and freedom, and this was going to be the future. Pat Robertson, on the other hand, a very evangelical preacher, said, well, the future was going to be a turn toward Christianity, evangelical Christianity, which was going to sweep the world. Islam was fated for the garbage can of history, along with Hinduism, along with Confucianism, Buddhism, and all of the other world religions. Martin Jacques, on the other hand, said, well, this American-style democracy and this American-style evangelical Christianity is powerful, but China is emerging as a rival to this Western-centric view of history. And China is going to rewrite the rules of politics and economics, and the age of America is over. Niall Ferguson wrote his book, Empire, saying that the United States, with the collapse of communism in the socialist world, except for China and Cuba, but the United States had better get on its horse and start building its empire. Admit that the United States is now the world leading empire, politically, culturally, economically, militarily. United States is numero uno. So embrace our destiny. Don't put on your baseball hat, say America great again. Say America dominating the world, as it had since the end of World War II. So there were competing theories about what was the future going to be, 21st century, and things were moving fast. God, a lot of you listening to me today probably remember the day of the first electric typewriter. Remember that little ball that used to bounce around? Photocopy machine. I mean, this was heaven on earth. Well, today we're up into Twitter, which has become a major political reality. We're up into global travel, global migration, the flow of capital. Things are moving so fast that maybe we should just not be worried about the 21st century, which we're already well into in 2020 as I speak. But what about the third millennium? Time is increasingly passing at a breakneck speed. Well, here we see Samuel P. Huntington. So let's start analyzing what was his theory. Well, his most famous book of 1996, which was preceded by his articles of the same name in Foreign Affairs magazine, was The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of the World Order. Interestingly, when his article came out a couple years previous to his book, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of the World Order was followed by a question mark in his article. Well, by 1996, he realized, well, it's no longer just a question. It has been answered. Well, Samuel P. Huntington has a view of history, human evolution. Well, when we came down from the trees in the Great Rift area of Ethiopia and Kenya, where I spent a wonderful vacation meeting Lucy, one of our ancient ancestors of like 4 million years ago. Well, we came down, and the first thing we did was we made family units. Now, this was an extended family because women were dying in childbirth. Kids would be left orphans. Men would be killed in battles and storms. And so the tribe became the fundamental organization of human society. Well, then one chief would get a little bit stronger than the others and conquer a couple of other tribes and make a kingdom. Then emerged civilizations. We all know the great civilizations of Egypt, of Persia, of China, of India, the Greek and Roman civilizations. Then we had the age of empires, and this is where one kingdom would take over a big chunk of the world. And this was the British, French, Russian, and eventually American, Spanish, Portuguese world empires. Well, the empires broke down and we went to nation states. Europe broke down into its nations, Germany, France. Well, when the countries of Africa became independent, they started establishing nation states, Sudan, Ethiopia, Nigeria. Well, Samuel P. Huntington says we are now going back to the ancient age of civilizations. And these ancient civilizations are returning with a vengeance. Well, a little bit of historical background. Age of tribes and kingdoms. Well, we all know from our reading of the Bible, there were 12 tribes of Israel. Each one had its own name, and each one had its own leaders. And periodically, a leader would arise, such as Moses, who would try to unite them into a people. Well, the 12 tribes entered and conquered the land of Canaan. We all know the Battle of Jericho, where God told the Hebrews to exterminate the population in the name of the Jewish God. Act of genocide that was justified by God and found. And the Hebrews went on to conquer the rest of the land of Canaan. Finally, the last part to be conquered was the city of Jerusalem in about the year 1000 BC, when King David conquered Jerusalem. Again, vicious warfare between the Canaanites and the Jerusalem people. The Jebusites defended their city tooth and nail, and when David conquered it, he killed all the men and sold all the children as slaves. But Saul, David, and Solomon united the 12 tribes. Jerusalem became the capital. King Solomon built the Temple of Jerusalem, which centralized the religious orientation of the 12 tribes on Jerusalem, made pilgrimage to Jerusalem obligatory, imposed a temple tax. So we have the passage from the age of tribes to the age of kingdoms, very well recorded in the Jewish Bible. Same thing happened in Egypt. You see the map on the left, Upper and Lower Egypt, gradually forming a great empire, and we see the furthest extents under Thutmose I, expanding the whole way up into modern-day Turkey, Syria, down through Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, Egypt, almost down into Nubia and Ethiopia. The age of empire with the pharaohs. We had the Babylonian Empire. We had the Persian Empire, the rise of great empires in India and China, conquering their neighbors, imposing taxes, spreading the culture, the language, the art, the music, and the religion of each empire. More recently, we had the Byzantine Empire. When the Roman Empire declined, it divided between the Western Empire and the Byzantine Empire. When Roman Empire was finally gone and the Byzantine Empire was declining, well, the Pope in Rome pretty well took over Western Europe and ended up crowning people like Charlemagne in the year 1000 AD as the Emperor Roman Empire based in France and Germany and Italy and the Low Countries. The Holy Roman Empire emerged once again with the emperors being crowned by the Pope in Rome. It was a holy empire, Catholic. Rome, it claimed to be the heir to ancient Rome, and it was an empire including Czech, Polish lands, Holland, Belgium, big chunks of France, northern Italy, Austria, northern today, former Yugoslavia, and all of Germany. So it was another great empire. Well, each of the empires of the past were based on a common identity. They were not just empires, but they were civilizations. The Roman Empire, which we see on the left in the year 275 under the reign of Aurelian. Northern Africa, Egypt, the Middle East, modern-day Turkey, Bulgaria, Greece, former Yugoslavia, Germany, Spain, up into England, the Low Countries with vassal states surrounding it. A civilization had a language. It was Latin. It had the gods of ancient Rome. It had Roman money, Roman highways, Roman laws, Roman sports, Roman way of dressing, Roman way of eating. And so it was more than just an emperor conquering a big area, but they were spreading the great civilization of Rome. And it continues until today. Go to Washington, D.C. Buildings are in Greek and Roman architectural styles. On our currency, we have a pluribus unum, one out of many in Latin. At the top on the right, we see the expansion of the great Hindu civilization from the Indus Valley spreading down into India, the merging of the ancient Indian people, the Dravidians, and the Aryans coming from the north. And to forget that in one time, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia, even up into the Philippines, was dotted with Hindu temples. Sanskrit was the great language of culture and civilization, Indian architecture. Until today, the king of Thailand, when he dies, it is believed that his soul returns to the ancient homeland in northern India, in the Himalayas. The current king of Thailand, Rama X. Of course, Ram is one of the ancient Hindu gods. In fact, I was in Thailand when for the funeral of the last king, Rama IX, who ruled for 70 years. So that was a glorious age of Hindu civilization. China emerged under Confucius, the great thinker, even religious leader of Confucianism, spreading from China down into Vietnam, up into Korea, and even into Japan and South Asia, where Confucianism, Chinese New Year, is still the major holiday throughout the Buddhist and Confucianist world. Chinese art, Chinese music, Chinese food. Once again, a great civilization still flourishing today. On the bottom right, we see the Islamic civilization. With the rise of the Prophet Muhammad in the 600s and 700s, the spread from Saudi Arabia up into Spain, North Africa, up into Europe, Albania, Bosnia, up into Russia, the Russian Empire, over to India and down into Indonesia and Malaysia. It was a civilization. Arabic was the sacred language of prayer and culture. Arabic architecture. Think of the Taj Mahal, the most beautiful example of Muslim architecture in the middle of Hindu India. Until today, the vast majority of the people of Indonesia, Malaysia, southern Thailand, and a big chunk of the Philippines are Muslims, the glorious mosques of the golden age of Islam in Spain. And so these were the great civilizations of the world, each with its own language, its own culture, its own religion, its own identity, food, way of dress. This was the golden age of civilization. Well, beginning in 1492, according to Samuel P. Huntington, the age of civilizations began to decline. With the unification of Spain, Spain gave Jews and Muslims and Protestants the choice: either convert to the official religion of Spain, Roman Catholicism, or get out. It is estimated that about half of the Jews and the Muslims and the Protestants converted, became Spanish, became Catholic. St. Teresa of Avila, probably one of the greatest saints of Spain, was from a family of converts, conversos. Spain, when it became united in 1492, it became the prototype of all nation states until today. One king, all the other kings were fired or demoted or pensioned off. One language, Castilian Spanish, as spoken in Madrid. One legal system, one money system, one culture, one religion, Roman Catholicism. And if you didn't want to adhere to this unification principle, you had the choice to get out. Portugal followed as the next big empire, as the next big nation state. Now, when we look at this map that I have here, we see all of these lines and color codes. These are the nation states today. We see Brazil and Argentina, Africa, chopped up into scores of little tiny countries, some big, some small. India, Burma, Thailand, they all accept the principle of the nation state. Spain on the left, we see the kingdoms of old Spain before unification. All of these borders were done away with, and Spain became united. Portugal followed, France, England followed. Other nation states, Germany in the 1870s, Italy got united. And in the 1960s, the nation state ideal was accepted by the countries of Africa. Nigeria, for example, it was a secular nation state, capitalistic, democratic. Religion was pushed into the background. Whether you were Muslim or Catholic or Protestant or animist, your passport said you were a Nigerian. Everybody voted. Everybody went to the public schools where you studied Nigerian history, but not religion. It was the new secular nation state, modeled after those of Western Europe and the United States. Now, throughout this history of humanity, according to Samuel P. Huntington, religion and politics were united. Israel was a Jewish state. The population who were not Jews were systematically exterminated, whether they were the people of Jericho, the ancient people of the Canaanites, the people of Jerusalem. You either became a Jew or you were slaughtered. And so, until today, Israel is a Jewish state. It is not a secular state. It is not a pluralistic state of all of the people. It is a state of the Jews. The Koran, Once again, the Islamic world was based on the Koran. Jews and other Hindus and Christians had to pay a special tax. They were allowed to stay, but let there be no doubt, it was a Muslim empire. You have the laws of Manu in India and other countries, religious laws, the analytics of Confucius, the laws of Confucius, which became the law and the political system of China. When Spain and Portugal, the Holy Roman Empire, the Emperor Charlemagne, once again, they were fiercely Catholic empires, nation states. Well, some people made the nation state into more than just a country with laws. They believed that religion and the nation state should be linked. So religion was a way of uniting the people. So the Israeli nation state is fiercely Jewish. Saudi Arabia, fiercely Muslim. The official church of Great Britain is the Episcopal or Anglican Church. The German states were either Catholic or Lutheran or Calvinist. Whatever the king decided was the religion of the state. Russia, see the picture on the right, St. Basil's Cathedral. I lived in Russia for a year when communism was collapsing, and I witnessed the return to religion as Orthodoxy, the Russian official religion. Even the United States tried to separate church and state, religion and politics, gave freedom of religion to everybody, no religious tests, no established church, but still the United States identified as a religious country, whether it's in God we trust on the dollar bill. George Washington used a Bible when he took the oath of office, which was not required by the Constitution. He added the words, "So help me God," which is not part of the Constitution, once again showing that the United States was rooted in religion. We are one nation under God, according to our Pledge of Allegiance. So religion, according to Samuel P. Huntington, has permeated human history from the beginning. Various attempts like the United States to separate the two. Some countries like Nigeria tried to be a secular state where Jews, Christians, and Muslims could coexist, but most countries return to the ancient, deeply rooted belief that politics was somehow related to religion, that religion was not just something you did on Sunday or Saturday or any other day, but it should dominate society. So whether it was the ancient empires or whether it was the civilizations or the nation state, governments realized that one common religious belief would unite the people. It would make them loyal. So you were fighting not just for Russia, but you were fighting for the Russian Orthodox Church. Might and power, the unity of the Jews, enable them to dominate more and more the entire Middle East. Love of country, and America not only loves the United States, but they believe that it should be transformed into a Christian state. Abortion, gay marriage, divorce, so many issues are not just political, but they are religious. That religion inspires the country. It inspires patriotism. It inspires people to go to war for God and country. So warfare is not just two countries, one country taking over another. When the United States went to war against Mexico, and stole Texas and California and everything in between. It was a war of good American Bible reading Protestants against a bunch of decadent Catholics. When Israel builds West Bank settlements, it is not just stealing land from another people, they are doing God's work. And as you can see from the crown of Great Britain on the left, it has the cross on top. Kings believe that their power in some way or another, it has a divine approval, whether it is the Pope crowning Charlemagne, whether it is the presence of religious leaders when the President of the United States says, "So help me God." Religion and politics have historically been united. Well, the national principle ended up triumphing over civilizations and everything else. The United States is a member of the United Nations, established in 1945. Before that was the League of Nations, founding after World War I. So the nation-state principle triumphed. Russia was Orthodox. England was Episcopal Protestant. This was the unifying principle. So we have all kinds of international organizations. Your prime loyalty was to your nation. Well, Samuel P. Huntington argues that the age of the nation is coming to an end. Here we see his vision of the future. We see the United States still on the map, but it is part of what he calls Western civilization. Many people call it the Atlantic Alliance. Western Europe, Catholics and Protestants, North America, Canada and the United States, as well as Australia and New Zealand, are part of Western civilization. Now, traditionally it has been Catholic and Protestant, but more and more it is becoming evangelical Protestant, a new form of Christianity. We see the Orthodox countries, the light blue, which is Kazakhstan, which is about 60% Russian speakers, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia. These are the Orthodox world. In fact, Russia makes a big deal now with the collapse of communism that it is the defender of Orthodox Christians around the world. The Islamic world saying, forget if you are Egyptian or Moroccan or Pakistani or Indonesian. What should unite you is your common Islamic civilization. Study Arabic. Go on pilgrimage to Mecca and fight for the liberation of Muslim areas which are occupied by non-Muslims. Think of the Russian areas, Central Asia, Palestine, under Israeli occupation. The Chinese area in the West is under Chinese occupation. The hundreds of millions of Muslims being persecuted in India. This should inspire Muslims of the future. And of course, most recently, we had ISIS trying to overcome all these little nation-state divisions and say Egypt and Sudan and Libya and Saudi Arabia and Palestine and Syria should unite into a restoration of the Islamic civilization. China, Confucianism, the return to Confucian teachings, which is a main intellectual underpinnings of Korea, China, Vietnam. Southern half of Africa, Samuel P. Huntington doesn't really know what to do. Is Islam going to end up conquering the rest of Africa? Are they going to become Catholic and Protestant, or are they going to establish a new civilization, which he doesn't know what to do with? Latin America, similarly. What's going to be the future of Latin America? He doesn't know. India is returning to its Hindu civilization. I was in Goa not too long ago and Mumbai, and the big fear of that large numbers of Christians in that area is they are going to be kicked out of the country or turned into second-class citizens in a restored Hindu empire. So this is his list of the world's great civilizations. In the 21st century, we are rediscovering our roots in ancient civilizations. We are returning to these civilizations where a Muslim living in Morocco feels that a Muslim living in Indonesia, in spite of so many differences, is part of one great civilization. They should get rid of all these little national borders and create a new nation of Islam or a civilization of Islam. Well, how does Samuel P. Huntington define a civilization? Well, it is traditions, attitude towards marriage, women, and the family. Islamic civilization, whether there are Muslims living in New York or China or Russia or Saudi Arabia or Indonesia, women are to dress modestly. Now, whether you cover yourself completely with a chador in Afghanistan or you wear a simple veil to cover your hair, at least you're not wearing mini skirts, tight pants, and exposing your breasts in a bikini when you go to the beach. Marriage is the basis of the society. A man, a woman, and the children. So civilizations do not tolerate single mothers with 15 or 20 illegitimate children living off of government charity. A civilization is based on the strong family unit, whether it is an evangelical Christian family, whether it is a Muslim family, a strict observant Jewish Orthodox family. It is the basis of society. Civilization believes that church and state are inseparable. Church and state cannot be separated. The United States tried, Western Europe tried to separate church and state. Nigeria when it became independent, India when it became independent after World War II, tried to establish secular states, but it failed. Nigeria is in the middle of a giant war between the Muslim and the Christians. India is going back to Hinduism and persecuting Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Israel is a Jewish state persecuting Christians and Muslims, West Bank settlers, trying to get rid of all these non-Jewish people. Another aspect of civilization is the holidays. I mean, if it is Christmas, every Christian comes alive. Even when I lived in Israel, December 25th, the university always scheduled final exams on Christmas Day to let any Christian students know that you are living in a Jewish state and Christians are second-class citizens. Stores close, even in the United States. Many liquor stores are closed Sunday morning. When I was a child growing up in Pennsylvania, in spite of separation of church and state and freedom of religion, restaurants were closed Sunday. Liquor stores were closed Sunday. My father was arrested once for washing the family car on Sunday. No sports were taking place on Sunday. The post office still does not deliver on Sunday. Architecture. Each civilization has its own unique architecture. We know what a mosque looks like, and it will never be confused with a Gothic Catholic or Protestant church. Music, Catholic church music, the chanting of Muslims, the prayers in Sanskrit of the Hindus or Hebrew in a synagogue. Marriage, divorce, part of the civilization. Even food is part of the civilization. Jewish, kosher food. Hindu, vegetarian. Muslim, halal food. Samuel Huntington argues that each civilization has what he calls a core language. Greek and Latin in the West. When I was in school, we had to do 4 years in high school of Latin and 1 year of classical Greek. Plus, we were allowed to take a foreign language, and I did 3 years of German. Arabic, even in a distant country like Indonesia, Arabic words and Arabic expressions are forever present in the language. To say good morning in Indonesian, you say selamat pagi. Salam meaning a peaceful morning or a peaceful day. Sanskrit underpins most of the languages of the Indian subcontinent. History. Well, of course, as Christians, we all know about Jesus and Joseph and Paul and all of that. Jews name their children after biblical characters. Muslims, from the Koran, the great heroes. Everybody has something to do with Muhammad, Ahmad, Mahmud, or whatever. Daily culture. People, why do we say God bless you in Western European countries? Because of the bubonic plague, which was viewed as a punishment from God. Inshallah, in Arabic, if God wills, they stay used from Africa to Indonesia, to Harlem, to the middle of Paris. Laws have increased validity when they are considered divinely inspired. Whether it is the laws of Deuteronomy in the Jewish Bible, the Koran is filled with laws and inspired the Sharia. Many people believe that God inspired the Constitution, at least evangelical Protestants do. The ruler is often identified with the particular god, whether it's the Pope crowning the Holy Roman Empire, the Archbishop crowning the Queen of England, Vladimir Putin taking the oath of office with Russian Orthodox priests behind him. This is divine rule, as well as constitutions are very often divinely ordered. The Islamic Republic of Iran does not have a constitution. Saudi Arabia does not have a constitution. The Quran is their constitution. Now, we are part of Western civilization, most of us, and even if we are Jewish living in the United States, we still have absorbed Western civilization. Classical Greek and Roman culture, Greek and Roman architecture. I mean, churches and the beautiful Sheret Israel Synagogue on 8th Avenue opposite Central Park, the Sephardic Synagogue of New York, is an imitation Greek temple. Catholics and Protestants have approaches to religion which are shared by Americans. Western civilization, according to Samuel P. Huntington, has many different languages, but they are mainly Germanic languages and Romance languages. English is Germanic, French and Italian are Romance languages. A principle of Western civilization was the attempt to separate spiritual and temporal powers. France, until today, viciously defends its secular character, banning religious hats or religious symbols in the public school system. Western civilization believes in the rule of law, plurality of social groups. You can get up, form a political organization, form a club, and is not considered a threat to the state. And in Western civilization, the individual is considered the supreme value. In Confucianism, China, the collective is the supreme value. We see that just recently as I speak. We are in the COVID-19 situation. Well, this is very much a perfect example of all of this, where you have the Chinese ordering draconian laws, wiping out the virus immediately. Whereas the United States is still very much individual. People refuse to wear the mask. They refuse to stay away from churches and synagogues. The individual freedom is more important than the collective good. So these are what Samuel P. Huntington says are the basic values of Western civilization. So what is his basic thesis? Number one, the age of the nation state is over. The United States will fade away into Western civilization. Along with Canada, Western Europe, Australia, we will have more in common with these countries than we will with Islamic or Confucianist or Hindu civilization. Part two is the future world will be composed of civilizations. International organizations are going to decline and be replaced by the civilization. Now, of course, this is a very difficult process. When the Islamic world tried to organize under ISIS and establish the Islamic State from Morocco to Indonesia, of course, the Israelis, the Americans, the Western Europeans, even the Chinese and the Russians all ganged up and wiped out ISIS, because the thing that the world feared would be a united, powerful Islamic world. Think of all the money from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Emirates linked with the atomic bomb of Pakistan, and the population of Indonesia, Malaysia, Egypt, all united in one country. Islamic civilization would once again rule the world. Point three is very important. People belonging to different civilizations cannot live together peacefully. We see this today as President Trump has his Muslim ban. Build a wall to keep out the Mexicans. Going to war against Islam in Palestine, supporting Israel 100%. Nigeria, as we're going to see in a minute, is falling apart between the Muslim North and the Christian South. A country like Sudan just fell apart. So Huntington is saying that a country like Israel will never be able to live in peace until Israel either exterminates or expels all the Christians and Muslims, or the Palestinians get organized and expel the Israelis. It will be non-stop war and genocidal war. Point four, states composed of people of different civilizations will be destroyed. Sudan has been destroyed. Nigeria will be destroyed. These countries cannot exist in the future if they have people of different civilizations. And point five, very importantly for Americans, is the United States must take steps to preserve its membership in Western civilization. Ban Muslims, ban Chinese, ban Mexicans, become a white Christian country again. So when Donald Trump says, make America great again, He wants to go back to the period just after World War II, when the United States was a white Christian Western European country without all these Chinese and Hindus and Muslims and Jews and everybody else. So his thesis is rather draconian, but this is going to be the future. Now, Samuel P. Huntington points out, and other historians have said, that his thesis is more than just up in the air, that it is being proved by history, by reality. And usually 6 examples of the clash of civilization, which are occurring now, today as I speak, are proofs of his civilization. Yugoslavia, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Israel, Palestine, USSR, and USA. Let's briefly talk about each of those, because each of these is, as Brian Hall's book said, is an impossible country. It will not survive into the future unless it takes major corrective measures to preserve its membership in its core civilization. Now, some of you are probably old enough to remember when Yugoslavia was on the map. When I was in my 20s, I hitchhiked once from Venice through Slovenia, stopping off in Ljubljana, Zagreb, down to Belgrade, down Belgrade up to Skopje, and then it took me almost 3 days to get across the mountains in Macedonia to Thessalonica in Greece. But it's one of those crazy trips that you do when you're young and never imagine the consequences or how difficult it's going to be. At that time, Yugoslavia was a united country. Yugoslavia means Southern Slavs. It was ruled by Tito, who was neutral between the Soviet Union and China and the United States. And it was one of the very successful socialist countries, but yet non-aligned, as they said. Well, on the map, it looked nice, and those little states looked nice, and everything looked just hunky-dory on the map when Yugoslavia was established after World War I. But if you look at the map on the right, we see the ethnic, religious, and linguistic groups. The pink area in the north, Slovenia, is Slavic but Catholic. Next is Croatia. You see Zagreb, which is also part of Western civilization. It is Catholic. It was ruled by Austria and Italy for centuries. The architecture, the music, the culture is very Western European. Well, then comes the green area, and there you see what is Serbia. You see Belgrade is Serbia, and then you see over where it says Bosnia-Herzegovina, majority Serbs. Now, Serbs are Orthodox, so they have more in common with Russia than they do the West. Slovenia and Croatia use the Latin alphabet, which you use in English. The Serbs use the Russian, the Cyrillic alphabet. So according to Samuel P. Huntington, Slovenia and Croatia could never live in peace with the Serbs. Well, that doesn't end the question, because you see the dark sort of brownish areas, those are the Muslims. Many of them are Turkish Muslims or influenced by Turkey. They have their own laws, their own food laws, their own clothing way of dress, and they have more in common with Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Turkey than they do with either the Catholics or the Serbs. So you had 3 civilizations crammed into one nation state called Yugoslavia. Well, according to Samuel P. Huntington, this country is the impossible country. It was only kept united by the firm grasp of the dictator Tito and his Communist Party. But it was fated to destroy in this age of the clash of civilizations. Catholics, Eastern European Orthodox Christians, and Muslims went to war. And this was the result. Slovenia and Croatia became part of Western Europe, joining the European community, Catholic, and basically expelled anybody, or anybody who was not Catholic was strongly encouraged to leave. Serbia, the pink area with Belgrade at its capital, tried to keep Montenegro and Kosovo in the south, but they broke off, as did the former Yugoslav Republic of Northern Macedonia. Bosnia and Herzegovina is still today an impossible country, where you have Croats, Serbs, and Muslims crammed into one little landlocked country, which only survives because of the presence of foreign troops. So, the case of Yugoslavia proved for many people that two peoples of two different civilizations cannot peacefully coexist in one nation state. The northern Slovenes and Croats are part of the European Union, Catholic and Western. Serbia, like Romania, bordering on it, and Bulgaria on the right, are part of the Russian zone Orthodox Christian world. And the Muslims still in Bosnia without independence are part of the Islamic civilization. So these three civilizations went to war. The Muslim countries were supporting the Bosnian Muslims. The Catholic countries supported Slovenia and Croatia. Russia poured tons of arms and volunteers into Serbia. The clash of civilizations destroyed Yugoslavia and will probably destroy Bosnia and Herzegovina at some time in the future. Another country that is an impossible country is Nigeria. On the left, we see Nigeria right in the armpit. I spent several months in Cameroon, which is very similar to Nigeria. The northern half is Muslim, the southern half is Christian and animist. If you look at the map on the right, we see the area marked with the slanted lines. That's the Muslim world. The brown area of Southern Africa is a mixture of Christian and animist. And if you look closely, you'll see that the dividing line goes right through the middle of Nigeria. The north is Muslim, the south is Christian and animist. Also, if you look at the map, you'll see Sudan. You see that yellow area? That's Ethiopia. They also have their problem. The southern half is Muslim, the northern half is Christian. But Sudan, to the left of that yellow country, Ethiopia, Sudan recently fell apart. The southern area, the brown area, broke away, formed the Republic of South Sudan. And the northern area, the slanted, is the Muslim country. So here again, these were impossible countries. Now on the right, on the left, we see Nigeria. The green areas are the majority Muslim areas. The southern area, lighter colored, are the predominantly Christian and animist. Now, civilizations there are very, very powerful. There are no liquor stores in the north, no gambling in the north. The schools teach Arabic is their second language after English. Mosques are everywhere. Muslim holidays are celebrated with closing of stores and schools and everything else. The southern part is Christian, meaning everybody's going to bars and drinking gin tonics and Manhattans. Women go around in halter tops, exposing their breasts and short skirts. You go to the beach, it's all bikinis and Speedo bathing suits. Now, when Nigeria was established after World War II by the British, they tried desperately to keep the country together. If you look at Nigeria, right in the middle, you see a little tiny country. You can't see it too well, but it's light colored and has a star on it. That's Abuja. The Nigerians decided to build a new capital city in the geographic middle of the country, right on the border between the Muslim North and the Christian South, as a way of proving that Muslims and Christians can live together. The president alternates, one Christian, then a Muslim, then a Christian, then a Muslim. But as I speak, the war is in high gear in Nigeria. In fact, when you pick up the news, you see that the federal troops are trying to keep order in the two parts, and it doesn't look like Nigeria is going to survive very long. Again, proof of Samuel P. Huntington's thesis that peoples of two different civilizations cannot peacefully coexist in one country. South Sudan, on the middle, we see North Sudan and South Sudan. The north area is predominantly Muslim. The south is predominantly Christian. When the two countries broke apart just a couple years ago, there was a mass exodus of Christians from the north to the south, mass exodus of Muslims from the south to the north. And on the right is Cameroon. There you see Yaoundé, where I spent months a number of years ago, down to Douala. Well, I traveled up to the north, Ngondere, Garoua, Marawa, and that was the strict Muslim areas. Now, that was a French colony. So in the southern Christian half, the people are predominantly Catholic. I mean, you're invited to dinner in the south. Everybody's going to be wearing Western clothes, speaking French, drinking a lovely vin rouge, eating escargot, snails, and very, very French influenced. But you go to the northern half and you're invited to visit somebody, the food is going to be halal, which is like kosher. No alcohol will be served. The women will be modestly dressed. No miniskirts or exposed breasts or even exposed hair. Now, Nigeria and Cameroon are probably going to end up going the way of Sudan, but of course it will be only after a long and bloody war. Here we see a map of the Islamic world. Once again, we see the light-colored areas from Mauritania and Morocco up into Pakistan, up into Uzbekistan and Turkey, which are overwhelmingly Muslim. Then you see other countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, which are 60 to 90%. Nigeria, we see about 50-50, Muslim north, Christian south. Sudan, this was before the partition of the country between the Muslim north and the Christian south. So we see areas where Muslims are a very large population. So you look at a country like India, you see that India has the world's largest Muslim population. They're not a majority, but they are hundreds of millions. So how are they going to survive? You look at China, you see large populations of Muslims. In the West, the Uyghurs are the majority of the population, being viciously persecuted by the Chinese. And you see on the map, you see Israel, and that is 16 to 35% Muslims. These are the Palestinians locked into their walled compounds like the Gaza Strip. And here again, will Israel be able to control its growing Muslim population? Now, another example of, or another proof of Samuel P. Huntington's theory that people of different groups will not long coexist in a nation state, and the force of civilization will destroy many states which are currently on the map. Well, as we all know, Great Britain conquered India, Pakistan, Myanmar, which is Burma, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, the Maldives Islands. This was all part of the Great British Empire. Well, areas were of mixed population. Pakistan was predominantly Muslim. India, hundreds of millions of Muslims, but Hindu majority. Bangladesh, Muslim majority. Myanmar, we see Rangoon, majority Buddhists. Sri Lanka, majority Buddhists. Maldives, majority Muslims. So the problem was when, after World War II, when England decided to get out of India, give it its independence, India recognized that already back in the late 1940s, the force of civilization was already growing. Yugoslavia was still surviving. The United States was still pretending to be a secular country. But the English realized back then that, long before Samuel P. Huntington even wrote his book, that the area had to be chopped up along civilizational lines. And so this is the map that eventually emerged. Now, of course, we all know with the partition of India into Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Burma, Sri Lanka, hundreds of millions of people were either forced out of one country to the other, encouraged very strongly to migrate, or massacred. And so this became a literal bloodbath as the forces of civilization tore the British Empire apart. When Queen Victoria was crowned Empress of China, or Empress of India, in 1876, you see a young Victoria. She ruled over this giant area. Well, it looked nice on the map, Great British Empire. But the question is, what was going to happen to it when, after World War II, Britain decided to withdraw? Well, India was a predominantly Hindu country, so the Muslims were either, millions of Muslims were either expelled, encouraged to leave, or those who remained were tolerated. But India tried to create a secular country. India, after World War II, decided to become like United States and become a secular country where Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Jews and Jains and Sikhs could all live together. So they adopted this post-World War II idea, just like Nigeria. We can all live together in happiness and become rich. We just won't talk about religion. Well, we know how long that lasted in India, and we know it's going to destroy Nigeria. It destroyed Sudan. It will probably destroy Israel, Palestine. Pakistan became a predominantly Muslim country with the expulsion and flight of most of its Hindu population. Bangladesh, which was united with Pakistan, became Muslim. Sri Lanka Buddhist, Nepal Hindu, Bhutan Hindu, Burma Buddhist, and the Maldives Muslim. Well, one area where Hindus and Muslims tried to live together is the area of Jammu and Kashmir. We see it on the map. It's on the border between China, Pakistan, and India, up in the mountains, up in the Himalaya mountains. Well, India kept control of the area. The majority of the population was Muslim, but India said we can live together. Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Jains and Sikhs can all live together. Well, this dream of a secular India where Christians and Muslims and everybody could live together gradually collapsed. And the collapse began in Jammu and Kashmir, where the Muslims said, we want either independence or to be part of Muslim Pakistan. India said, no, we are going to keep you in India. And so Jammu and Kashmir were partitioned through a war, again, a clash of civilizations between the Hindu civilization and the Muslim civilization. Now, today, as we speak, we see the green areas, the northern areas, have been occupied by Pakistan. The pinkish orange area, Jammu and Kashmir, and the southern part is still occupied by India, even though the majority of the population is Hindu, is Muslim. And a big chunk was occupied by China, and you can see that on the right. This area continues to be in the forefront of the clash of civilizations. India and Pakistan have gone to war many times over this area. Terrorists from both sides are at war, liberation movements from both sides at war. It is an area where the clash of civilizations is taking place. Is this area going to be ruled by Hindu India or Muslim Pakistan? So here's another example of the force of civilization destroying the British Empire and still until today remaining unresolved. Palestine, another classic example of the clash of civilizations. When Britain left Palestine in 1948 and 49, the country had people of two different civilizations. The Jews were mainly European Jews who had settled there, wanted Western culture, but they wanted a Jewish state. The Palestinians wanted to remain part of the Muslim world. Well, the UN tried to solve the problem by basically saying and agreeing Jews and Muslims will never be able to live together in peace. And so to avoid a war, we had the UN Partition Resolution of 1947, which made the light yellow area, which would be the Palestinian Muslim state, and the orange area, which would be the Jewish state. Well, of course, both sides wanted to control all of Palestine, and so the Muslim countries of Egypt and Jordan and Syria joined up, aided the Palestinians, and tried to wipe out the Jewish state. Well, as we all know, the Jews won the war. And since the war and in the Yom Kippur War, they have been gradually expanding. 6 million Palestinians either fled or were expelled. Palestinians are being rounded up, and on a picture on the right, we see the walled compounds where the Muslim population is being concentrated. The Gaza Strip there, 2 million Palestinians, the vast majority refugees from what is today Israel, West Bank settlements, taking more land, rounding up more Palestinians, putting them in walled compounds. As you all know, I lived for 5 years in Israel, and I witnessed this, where huge areas of the West Bank, such as Bethlehem, entire suburbs were taken by the Israelis, everything dynamited, the population rounded up and dumped in walled compounds. A wall surrounds these areas. Once again, proof of Samuel P. Huntington's theory that people of different civilizations cannot live together in peace. One will either wipe out the other, or there will be constant war, as in Kashmir, as in Nigeria. So Israel is considered again, Israel-Palestine, proof of the inability of different civilizations to live together. The millions of Palestinian refugees not permitted to return to their country by Israel, still roaming the world. West Bank settlements, the picture in the bottom. You can see the wall at the bottom of the picture to separate the Jewish new settlements from the old Palestinian. You can see the flag at the bottom. That's the Palestinian flag. The Palestinians in their walled compound on one side, and the big new growing Jewish settler population on the other side. Of course, the Palestinians fight back. They're not going to accept this situation. Israelis and Americans call them terrorists. Of course, they are fighting to defend their country in this clash of civilizations. The last example of a country which was impossible and could not continue to exist in the age of clash of civilizations was the great USSR. I remember visiting the USSR when it was still the USSR, spent a vacation there. And in 1992, 91, I went back and spent an entire year there. When I arrived, my passport said, "Welcome to the USSR." When I left about a year later, the passport said, "Thank you for visiting the Russian Republic." Well, the map we see here is the map of the USSR. Well, at the bottom of the picture, we see Turkmenistan, we see Kazakhstan. These are the majority Muslim areas. Azerbaijan is also a Muslim area. We see countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania at the top of the picture. They are part of Western civilization, more in common with Sweden and Norway and Finland and Germany than they have with the Russian Orthodox. Russia itself, along with Belarus and Ukraine, are Russian Orthodox people. So, according to Samuel P. Huntington, the USSR could not exist in the age of clash of civilizations. The Muslim republics, Kazakhstan and everything south, broke away and became independent Muslim republics. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania broke away and joined Western Europe in the European community. Russia is still fighting to keep control of Belarus and the Ukraine, but they do share the same religion, same language, same culture as members of the Russian Orthodox civilization. So these examples are more than examples. According to Samuel P. Huntington, they are proof that people of different civilization cannot live together. The world of the future, the 21st century, is not going to be dominated by countries anymore, but by civilizations. Well, the big multi-million-dollar question is, where does that leave the United States? My God, we are a country of immigrants, and more so all the time are pouring in. Well, Samuel P. Huntington had to think quite a bit about what to do with the United States. We had a large population of Jews, growing population of Muslims, large millions of population from Latin America, Hispanic people, huge population of Chinese pouring in, taking over entire neighborhoods. Were these forces going to destroy the United States? Was the United States going to be torn apart like Palestine, like Nigeria, like Sudan, like the Soviet Union, like India? Were we going to be a casualty of history? Well, this was a very serious question, and you can see who are we, and the subtitle is The Challenges to American National Identity. He's basically saying, will the United States survive into the future? Well, the United States tried to bridge the gaps between civilizations. Most of the Jews were assimilated and became nice Americans and eating pepperoni pizza and drinking beer and going to football games and going to the public schools. Only the Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn refused assimilation and tried to remain a people apart with their own schools, their own culture, their own language, living in America, but not considering themselves Americans. So the United States managed to absorb with its melting pot so many different people. We were one nation under God, as President Eisenhower declared the country. We trusted in God. So the United States still believed that it could preserve peace among all of its different and increasingly diverse population by a sort of generic under God. Well, Samuel P. Huntington said, is this going to preserve the United States and let it escape the Great War of Civilization? Well, the United States started becoming a major participant in the clash of civilization. It began with people like Ronald Reagan, who was the first president to court the religious right and to say that the United States is more and more a Christian country. The GOP captured the religious right of people like Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell. In fact, many people called the GOP not the grand old party, the Republicans, but God's own party. You see Pat Robertson saying the problem we have in America is a systematic erosion of our religious values in an attempt by certain liberal groups to expunge our Christian heritage from the public square, saying the United States is a Christian country. We see signs all over. Jesus Christ is Lord of the USA. Well, in 1965, the situation really got serious, and that is when Washington, Congress, and the president enacted the Hart-Celler Immigration Reform Act. This opened the gates of immigration to almost anybody and everybody. The gates of immigration had been closed basically from World War I, 1919 and early 20s, until 1965. And the United States, until 1965, was an overwhelmingly white Christian country, part of Western civilization, even if it didn't really understand the term at that time. All the groups who had come in, Italian Catholics, even the Jews who had flooded in, had assimilated. Even if they arrived as Orthodox Jews, they very quickly became Reform Jews, intermarried with other people, ate normal things, were 100% Americans, fought in World War I, fought in World War II, were total Americans. Well, the melting pot started breaking down, according to Samuel P. Huntington, because all these people coming in after 1965 had no intention of becoming 100% American or abandoning their civilization and becoming part of Western civilization. On the right, We see the Ganesha Temple on Bound Street in Flushing, Queens. We're celebrating the festival of the Ganesha, the god of prosperity. Samuel B. Huntington argues that all these Chinese are coming, taking over areas like Flushing, Queens, and every other city, a huge Chinatown. He argues that they come to the United States, but they have no intention of assimilating and disappearing into the American melting pot. They remain loyal to China. Latin Americans, the Mexicans want bilingual schools. They want to preserve their culture, not assimilate. Arabs in Brooklyn along Atlantic Avenue. You think you're in Saudi Arabia. Iranians remaining loyal to Shia Islam. Indians, Pakistanis, Koreans, Africans, Israelis, and immigrants from the former USSR. Samuel P. Huntington says they have no intention of becoming 100% Americans. Now, we see this in the news. We're constantly banning Chinese from working in certain industries because they are accused of spying for China. Latin Americans go back to Mexico or Dominican Republic for their vacations and remain very much involved in their countries. I have a friend, he's the head of personnel for one of the largest chemical research companies in the United States. And he said he's no longer allowed to hire Chinese or Arabs or Muslims or Israelis because they're always, he says, they're accused of working for their respective countries, stealing trade secrets. They are a security risk, which cannot be, and they cannot be allowed to work for major American companies, even in the military, where you get people of these groups. Question is, are they loyal to America? If a war breaks out, which side would they be on? This is very similar to the World War I, when there was such a large number of German Americans who were suspect. Now, eventually they did assimilate and became 100% Americans, but I mean, it was not an easy situation. So Samuel B. Huntington is saying that the melting pot is breaking down, that we are becoming not a nation of one people, but islands of people of dubious loyalty. Some people call it the salad bowl, whereas everything is not just melting and becoming part of one society, but they're ethnic islands. With the Chinese, they might get an American passport and be loyal to the United States and go to the public school, but they still have deep Chinese loyalties. Muslims, will they become terrorists and join in the fight against the war being fought by Muslims around the world? People argue that a multicultural education in a pluralistic society basically admits that the melting pot is dead. We are no longer one people, but multicultural, pluralistic society. And Samuel P. Huntington asks the question, can such a society long endure in the age of the clash of civilization? As you can guess, Samuel P. Huntington is was until he died, very, very pessimistic about the future of the United States. Economic spying, Chinese and Indians in high-tech computer scientific research, constantly being arrested for stealing secrets and sending them back to China or India, or someone, an Indian coming, working for a big chemical company, stealing his secrets, going back to India and opening up his own company. mobile populations, people who have loyalty to no country. I was in Dubai not too long ago. I mean, the perfect mobile, nomadic population. Everybody was from somewhere else. Americans, Chinese, Indonesians, Indians, Africans, Canadians, Germans, French, work a couple years here, and then when they get tired of it, they'll move someplace else. And this is a growing reality where many people have 3 and 4 passports. And you say, who are you loyal to? And they said, I'm loyal to me. They go wherever the economic opportunities are. Now we have the pandemic, and since I had just been in Dubai, I followed the news a little bit, and I found that 10% of the population of Dubai during the pandemic just up and left because the jobs were getting hard to get. And so they just packed up and went to Argentina, they went to Brazil, they went back home, they'd got to the United States using whatever passport was convenient. Another sign of the disloyalty to all these new people pouring into the United States from all these different countries is their loyalty is not just an emotional loyalty, but you get American Muslims, some of them even born here, who joined ISIS and are fighting for the liberation of Palestine, fighting for the freedom of Muslims in India or China or Africa. Israeli settlers, American-born Jews deciding that they are more loyal to Israel and going over, joining these settler groups, becoming West Bank settlers and terrorists, and saying that we have American passports, we have American homes, but we are fighting in the army of a foreign country. And so this is a type of thing that Samuel P. Huntington brings up to say that all of these people who are flooding into the United States since 1965, they are going to destroy the United States. Well, this impression that the United States is in decline, we see Time magazine, yes, America is in decline. No, America is still #1, or the picture on the right, the USS United States sinking after hitting an iceberg. What's the iceberg? According to Samuel P. Huntington, unlimited immigration of people from non-Western Christian civilizations. This is going to lead to the decline and destruction of America. And we see it today everywhere. Upper picture on the left, building the wall to keep out Mexicans. On the right, the clash with China. It's not just economic, but keeping out Chinese students, Chinese businessmen, stopping Chinese immigration. Below that, stop Islam, stop the Muslim immigration to Western Europe and the United States. On the left, keep out the Jews. The Jews killed Jesus. God hates Obama. Here again, the anti-Black, anti-Jewish, anti-Mexican, anti-Chinese, anti-Muslim. What underlies all of these? The vision of America as it was before 1965, when America was white Christian. So this mentality of Samuel P. Huntington has really permeated American society. We see a book here, The End of White Christian America. At the bottom, we see Donald Trump, for once without his Make America Great baseball hat. But when he says Make America Great, it means going back to white Christian America. He once made a statement that he wanted a New York City where he could walk down the street on Christmas Day and wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and didn't have to worry whether they were Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or Confucianist or anything else, that America could go back to the days when it was a Christian country. And we see this mingling of Christianity and the cross. Once again, very much the Trump idea of going back to a Christian America. And he, beginning with Ronald Reagan, going through George Bush, captured the evangelical Christian, make America Christian again mentality. Well, the threat to the United States was very real. September 11 really launched the United States into its war against Islam. The World Trade Center, symbol of a renewed American greatness, were both destroyed. Well, George W. Bush took this not only as a sign that a handful of Muslim terrorists from Saudi Arabia had destroyed 2 buildings, he interpreted this as a sign of a war, a cosmic clash of civilizations between Islam and Christian America. The war against Iraq had absolutely nothing to do with September 11, and even the myth that there were weapons of mass destruction was proven false, but it was a war against a major Muslim country in the Middle East. And in this war of civilizations, nothing is forbidden. No crime is too terrible. So we got torture, waterboarding, mass murder in Iraq. I mean, this is not a war between 2 nation states fighting over territory. This is a clash of civilizations. One God fighting against another God. So, are we moving into a century, if not a millennium, of holy wars? We see the revitalization of Islam, rise of ISIS, the rise of Muslim parties across the Muslim world, the rise of Islam in France and in Europe, Turkey turning more and more to Islam away from its secular nation state. On the right, we see the BJP, the party of Hindus in India, once again make India Hindu again, get rid of Jews and Christians and Muslims. You see the Israeli settlers, the ultra-right-wing religious Jews taking over the West Bank. They want an Israel which is 100% Jewish. No Christians, no Muslims. And so we see the waging of holy wars. Communism, anti-religious communism collapsed. And what's the first thing that Putin did? Revitalized the Russian Orthodox Church as its new ideology. I love that picture. You see the missile, but with a Russian Orthodox cross. So you have Russian Orthodox world armed to the teeth with atomic bombs, expanding its influence. And this is not just defending and expanding Mother Russia. This is doing God's work, the Russian Orthodox Church. Burma expelling its Muslim population, the Rohingya. And of course, nobody doing anything to stop it because nobody cares. They're just a Muslim minority in a Buddhist country. Even Buddhism, as you can see from the Time magazine, Buddhism, which was often viewed as a religion of peace and meditation, is now discovering its militaristic roots. I was in southern Thailand, which is the Muslim part of Thailand. Thailand is Buddhist. The whole southern part is Muslim. And I saw Buddhist monks in their robes walking around the streets with submachine guns to fight off the armed Buddhists of the north. And so you see the rise of Buddhist terror. Now, of course, it's not Buddhist terrorism in their eyes. It's the rise of Buddhist militancy. Make Buddhism great again. So this is a time of religious wars, not just the Israelis and the Jews and Muslims in Israel, or the Hindus and Muslims in India, or the Buddhists and Muslims, or in the United States, the many religious minority groups being attacked by the ultra-right Christian movements. Religious warfare is a reality. And this is a war which is only going to get first. On the right, you see the Uyghurs. China's campaign against its Muslims in the West, rounding up millions of Muslims, putting them into camps. I mean, forcing them either to give up Islam or to leave the country. This is a war of vicious warfare. The history of ISIS. I mean, even Muslims argue that ISIS was extremely militant. But when you're fighting against the United States and China and Western Europe and Israel, it is a vicious war. Not long ago, I visited the monument to Dr. Baruch Goldstein, the butcher of Hebron, who got a submachine gun, went into a mosque in Hebron, massacred 30 or 40 worshipers, once again claiming he is doing God's work. In Hebron, there's a big memorial to him where people leave flowers. They consider him a saint. So this is an era of vicious religious warfare. You can compromise when it's business or economics or culture, but when it's God, you don't compromise. Around the world, we see the rise on the upper right of the evangelical Christians in Brazil. Once again, make Brazil evangelical Christian again. Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, is an evangelical Protestant, and the evangelicals are his major supporters. In France, we see Charlie Hebdo, where the government is supporting the publication of vicious anti-Muslim so-called cartoons. But I think in the United States, most of them would be considered racist hate speech. We see the clash of civilizations. At the bottom, we see the Orthodox Jews in Queens, Forest Hills, where I live, and in Brooklyn, saying we will not comply with the laws of the virus. They do not accept the laws of the secular state. They view themselves as above national laws, responsible only to their rabbis. On the right, the ban on mosques. Many cities in the United States are trying to outlaw the construction of mosques. Donald Trump has already ended Muslim immigration and is clamping down on Muslim education and schools. But mosques are the visible presence of Muslims in the country, especially with the minaret. In some countries, like in Switzerland and France, they're not even allowed to build a mosque. And if they do give them permission to build a mosque in Switzerland, they cannot have the minaret. It cannot be visible from a distance. It has to be on a side street somewhere where nobody will see it. So will holy war dominate the future? It's a scary thought, but it is already here. And I think it's only going to get worse as civilizations call upon their respective gods for justification, and they go marching off to war. How this is going to affect the United States? Well, that is going to be a major question. Samuel P. Huntington was very pessimistic. Donald Trump has taken very strict measures to halt migration of non-white Christians. But those who are here, except for the Mexicans, which he's rounding up and expelling, will probably remain. Will the United States survive as a melting pot, as a unique country? Will the United States be able to resist the clash of civilization and maintain peace between Muslims and Jews and Catholics and Protestants and Hindus and Buddhists? Or will the United States be torn apart by an ever increasingly bloody clash of civilizations? Well, thank you, everybody. Once again, this is your featured speaker, Ron Brown, Dr. Brown. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I hope it didn't make you depressed or upset, but like myself, having traveled around the world, spending time everywhere. Last January, I was a month in Brazil, studying the role of evangelical Christians and the future of Brazil in all of this. 5 years in Israel, I was there during the Yom Kippur War. I saw the clash of civilization outside my window. I would go up to the Golan Heights and sit around with Israeli soldiers who were eating sunflower seeds and drinking a beer, and we'd watch airplanes from Syrians and Israelis fighting. I went to Haifa and hung out with American volunteers coming over, Jews and non-Jews in the American army, fighting on the side of Israel. So that brings an end to this talk, and I hope to see you sometime in the future. And once again, read the newspaper, keep up on the news, because a lot is happening.